In January 2024, something unprecedented happened in Miami-Dade County. The largest industrial real estate deal of the entire year didn't go to Amazon. It didn't go to a tech giant. It didn't go to a Wall Street hedge fund. It went to a church. $174 million. That's how much one religious organization paid for 6 massive warehouses in Hialeah, Florida, just miles from Miami International Airport. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. This wasn't an isolated purchase. This was the 6th building they bought from the same seller. And by the time you finish watching this video, you will understand why a faith community founded in the 1830s is now operating like one of the most sophisticated real estate investment firms on the planet. The question everyone should be asking is simple. Why is a church buying warehouses? What do they know that the rest of us don't? Stay with me. Welcome back to Solvani. I'm glad you're here. On this channel, we explore the hidden systems behind major institutions, the stories that mainstream media overlooks, the patterns that only become visible when you connect the dots across decades of evidence. Today, we're going deep into one of the most fascinating institutional transformations happening in America right now. We're going to examine how a religious organization quietly became Florida's largest private landowner, how they accumulated an estimated $236 billion in total wealth, and why in the last few years, they've shifted their strategy from something that made perfect sense for their beliefs, owning farmland, to something that reveals an entirely different kind of thinking, industrial logistics. This is not a story about faith. This is a story about strategy. And before we continue, if you find value in this kind of deep analysis, the kind of content that connects historical patterns to present-day decisions, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. It helps more people discover these investigations, and it allows me to keep producing this type of research. Now, let's begin. The Church of Jesus, Christ of Latter-day Saints, often referred to as the LDS Church, was founded in 1830 in upstate New York. Today, it has grown to over 17 million members worldwide, with congregations in virtually every country on earth. But here's what most people don't realize. From its earliest days, this organization understood something profound about survival. Land is power. The early members of this faith faced extraordinary persecution. They were driven from state to state, New York to Ohio, Ohio to Missouri, Missouri to Illinois. When they finally settled in the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, they carried with them a hard-won lesson. If you want to build something lasting, you need to own the ground beneath your feet. And own it they did. Today, multiple investigations suggest the LDS Church controls approximately 1.7 million acres of land across the United States alone. That's larger than the state of Delaware. Some estimates place the total market value of their real estate holdings, including religious sites, commercial properties, and agricultural land, at over $100 billion. Let me put that in perspective. They are ranked as the 5th largest private landowner in America, behind only massive timber companies like Weyerhaeuser and Rayonier, and conservation organizations like the Nature Conservancy, a religious institution holding more land than most Fortune 500 companies. But land ownership is only part of the story. In 2019, a whistleblower named David Nielsen, a former senior portfolio manager at the church's investment arm, filed a complaint with the Internal Revenue Service. His claims were explosive. He alleged the church had accumulated approximately $100 billion in a single investment fund called Ensign Peak Advisors. $100 billion in stocks, bonds, and other securities. The story gained widespread attention. And in 2023, the Securities and Exchange Commission confirmed part of it. The SEC charged both the LDS Church and Ensign Peak Advisors with using 13 shell companies to hide the true size of their investment portfolio for over 20 years. The church agreed to pay $1 million in fines. Ensign Peak paid $4 million. In the official statement, the church acknowledged what it called mistakes and stated they had been in compliance since 2019. But here's the critical detail that got lost in the headlines. The SEC investigation was about stocks, about securities reporting. It revealed nothing about their real estate strategy. And that's where the really interesting patterns emerge. Before we go deeper, I'm curious. Did you know about the scale of these holdings before this video? Let me know in the comments. To understand why the Miami warehouse purchase matters, you first need to understand where the church's real estate strategy began. It began with food. The LDS Church has long emphasized what they call self-reliance and preparedness. Members are encouraged to maintain food storage, to be ready for difficult times, to take care of their families and communities without depending on outside help. This isn't just personal advice, it's institutional doctrine. And the church practices what it preaches at an industrial scale. In 1950, the church purchased what would become their crown jewel of agricultural holdings, Deseret Ranches in Central Florida. Today, Deseret Ranches covers nearly 300,000 acres. That's almost 500 square miles, spanning 3 Florida counties, Osceola, Orange, and Brevard. It operates the most productive cow-calf ranch in the entire United States, maintaining over 44,000 head of cattle. But they didn't stop there. In 2013, the church made headlines by purchasing nearly 400,000 additional acres of timberland in Florida's Panhandle from St. Joe Company for $565 million. That single transaction made them the largest private landowner in the state of Florida, controlling over 2% of the entire state U.S. land mass. Let that sink in. 2% of Florida, one organization. And here's something fascinating that most analysts missed. The church's agricultural holdings aren't just about food production. They're about optionality. That Deseret Ranch property? It sits just 50 miles southeast of Orlando International Airport. In recent years, the church has worked with Osceola County on a long-range master plan that could eventually transform portions of that agricultural land into a massive development, potentially housing nearly 500,000 people by 2080. In 2024, their investment arm, Farmland Reserve, applied to annex over 52,000 acres into the city of Orlando. If approved, it would nearly double Orlando's size. They bought farmland in the 1950s when it was relatively inexpensive. They operated it productively for decades. And now, as one of the fastest-growing metropolitan areas in America expands toward them, that agricultural investment becomes something far more valuable. This is patient capital, generational thinking. The kind of strategy most investors simply cannot execute because they're focused on quarterly returns. But recently, something has changed. The church isn't just buying more farmland anymore. They're buying warehouses. In December 2023, a real estate transaction closed that sent ripples through the commercial property world. Property Reserve, the church's commercial real estate investment arm, paid $174.3 million for 6 warehouses at Beacon Logistics Park in Hialeah, Florida. The property spans over 1.3 million square feet of industrial space, located just northeast of Miami International Airport, one of the busiest cargo airports in the Western Hemisphere. But here's what made industry observers sit up and pay attention. This wasn't a one-time purchase. 7 months later, in July 2024, they came back and bought another warehouse from the same developer for $56 million. Then another in early 2025 for $59 million. They've now acquired 6 buildings from Codina Partners at this single location. The total investment exceeds $280 million. So the obvious question is, why? Why would an organization famous for owning farmland, cattle ranches, and citrus groves suddenly pivot to industrial warehouses? The answer reveals something profound about how the most sophisticated investors in the world are thinking right now. Let's talk about what's happening in real estate. Over the past decade, industrial logistics has become the single hottest asset class in commercial real estate. Not office buildings, not retail, not even residential in many markets. Warehouses. According to industry data, in 2023, investments worth nearly $87 billion targeted the industrial sector, making it the second largest commercial real estate asset class in America, behind only multifamily housing. The catalyst? E-commerce. In 2014, online shopping represented about 6% of retail sales. Today, it's over 16%. And research from major firms like Prologis and CBRE suggests it could reach 30% by 2030. Here's the critical detail that explains why warehouses matter. E-commerce requires approximately 3 times more warehouse space than traditional brick-and-mortar retail. Every time someone clicks Buy Now on their phone, that product needs to be stored somewhere, picked from a shelf, packed, and shipped, often within 24 to 48 hours. CBRE research found that for every $1 billion in e-commerce sales growth, the market needs an additional 1.25 million square feet of distribution space. $1 billion. 1.25 million square feet. The math is staggering. But here's what makes the Miami location particularly strategic. Florida has experienced massive population growth over the past decade. Miami-Dade County alone sees enormous import volume through its seaport and airport. The warehouses the church purchased aren't just generic storage. They're Class A logistics facilities with 36-foot ceiling heights, modern loading infrastructure, and proximity to international shipping routes. In other words, they bought exactly the type of asset that institutional investors worldwide are scrambling to acquire. Think about this for a moment. An organization that started with cattle ranches is now investing in the same asset class as the world's largest pension funds and private equity firms. What do you think this signals about their understanding of where the economy is heading? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. There's a narrative that has long surrounded the LDS Church's financial strategy. It goes something like this. The church buys farmland because they believe in food storage. They're preparing for hard times. They're a prepper organization operating at institutional scale. There's truth in that narrative. The church absolutely does emphasize self-reliance and preparedness. They operate bishops' storehouses, community centers that provide food and supplies to members in need. Their agricultural operations support these charitable efforts. But the Miami warehouse purchases reveal something more complex. This isn't just preparedness. This is portfolio optimization. Let me explain what I mean. A traditional food security strategy would focus on farmland, storage facilities for grain and preserved goods, and distribution networks for humanitarian aid. Industrial logistics warehouses near Miami International Airport serve a different purpose entirely. They're designed for high-velocity commercial operations, the rapid movement of consumer goods, not long-term food storage. The properties the church acquired at Beacon Logistics Park are leased to commercial tenants. Power tools company Makita Latin America, for example, took over 90,000 square feet at the facility. These aren't charity warehouses. They're income-producing investment properties generating substantial returns. This suggests a significant evolution in institutional thinking. The church appears to be actively diversifying from agricultural real estate, which tends to be stable but offers modest returns, into industrial logistics, which has demonstrated some of the strongest appreciation and rental growth of any asset class over the past decade. Industrial property rental rates in the United States have more than doubled between 2013 and 2023, according to Statista data. And here's a detail that deserves attention. Property Reserve, the entity making these warehouse purchases, is led by CEO Ashley Powell. It operates with a stated portfolio value estimated at approximately $100 billion in commercial real estate alone. That's separate from Ensign Peak Securities investments, one organization, multiple investment arms, hundreds of billions in combined assets, operating with the sophistication of a major institutional investor. When you look at the evidence objectively, a pattern emerges. The church isn't just buying real estate for religious purposes. They're executing a diversified investment strategy across multiple asset classes: stocks, bonds, agricultural land, commercial real estate, industrial logistics, with a time horizon measured in decades, not quarters. They can afford to be patient. They have no external shareholders demanding returns, no quarterly earnings calls, no activist investors pushing for short-term gains. This allows them to acquire assets during market downturns, hold through cycles, and optimize their portfolio over generations. In many ways, they operate less like a traditional religious organization and more like an endowment fund, similar in structure to major university endowments like Harvard or Yale, but at an even larger scale and with even longer time horizons. Some researchers have projected that, at current growth rates, the LDS Church's total wealth could reach $1 trillion by the mid-2040s. $1 trillion. So what does all of this mean? I want to be clear about something. This video is not a criticism of the LDS Church or its members. Religious organizations have every legal right to accumulate assets, make investments, and manage their finances as they see fit. The church pays taxes on its commercial properties. It operates within the law. And many of its investments, particularly in agriculture, do support genuine charitable and humanitarian efforts. But the Miami warehouse story reveals something worth contemplating. We live in an era where institutional power increasingly concentrates in entities that operate outside traditional public accountability. Private equity firms, sovereign wealth funds, family offices, And yes, major religious organizations are accumulating assets at scales that were previously unimaginable. The LDS Church's real estate strategy offers a case study in long-term institutional thinking. They bought Florida farmland in the 1950s when few others saw its value. Today, that land is worth billions and sits adjacent to one of America's fastest-growing metropolitan areas. They accumulated securities for decades, quietly building a portfolio that now rivals major hedge funds. And now they're pivoting into industrial logistics, recognizing, perhaps before many others fully appreciated it, that the physical infrastructure of e-commerce is the new foundation of economic activity. Whether you view this as prudent stewardship, impressive foresight, or something that raises questions about institutional transparency and accountability, that's for you to decide. What's undeniable is the scale and sophistication of what's happening. A church founded in the 1830s, driven from settlement to settlement by persecution, now operates as one of the largest and most sophisticated real estate investors in America. History, as they say, is full of surprises. Thank you for staying with me through this investigation. I hope this video gave you a new perspective on how major institutions operate, often in ways that are invisible to the casual observer, but which shape the economic landscape we all live in. The warehouse strategy in Miami is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The church's real estate holdings extend across all 50 states, and their influence on land markets, development patterns, and local economies is significant. If you found this analysis valuable, I encourage you to subscribe to Salvini and turn on notifications. We'll continue exploring these kinds of hidden systems, the stories that reveal how power actually works in the modern world. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What questions does this raise for you? What other institutions would you like to see investigated through this kind of lens? Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and your feedback shapes the direction of future content. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, the most important patterns are often the ones hiding in plain sight. I'll see you in the next one.